Hey, what's up, everybody? And welcome to another episode of Free Real Estate Friday. It's been a minute since I've been on here. I think it's been since January. And the reason I wanted to be sure to come in today was we had some big news today in the real estate world. I think it's remains to be seen its impact, but we'll get into that a little bit. To be very clear, this is a proposed end to the saga. And I'll explain what that saga is because I'm guessing if you're not in the real estate industry, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway, this is episode number 74, Free Real Estate Advice Friday. I do think I have a guest next week. Haven't had a guest in a minute. And I think that this guest, although he's in a different market, we're going to talk about the subject that I'm talking about today because it's big news. So to give you a little perspective here, if you've heard anything about this, this is called the Sitzer Burnett case. Pretty big in real estate as far as compensation for buyer's agents. And the way that works in a nutshell today, and I'm sure most people understand this, is that, me as a realtor, I'm representing you as a buyer. I've talked about in the past the value of cementing a buyer's agent, signing an agreement with a buyer's agent. And, we get a lot of people that are very resistant to that. And, it's kind of up to us if we choose to work with them despite that or not. And that's a whole separate conversation that I've talked about ad nauseum, especially on TikTok, about it's not a great move for the buyer because it's the difference between me having a client and me having just a customer, someone that, I may find them the house. I hope I do. Obviously that's the only way I get paid. And obviously I want to help people out, but if I want to help people out the most, I would expect a little bit of loyalty from them. And if they sign a buyer's agreement, then they're a client, then I am on the hunt for a house for them. Very different situation. So the Sitzer Burnett case came about a while back, and basically this is in regards to how buyers agents are compensated. So today, when I go and look for homes for buyers, I'm looking on the MLS, multiple listing service that every realtor uses to find homes. This is the same data that goes out to Zillow or whatever website you use or app you use for looking for homes. All the same data. And from the agent point of view, we can actually see on there what the listing agent is offering up to the buyer agent as far as compensation. Now I will tell you, I've run over the years a couple times because I often get asked by my sellers, like what should we offer as far as buyers compensation. And actually we don't need to discuss it too much because, over the past few years, particularly here in Hunterdon County, there's been a overwhelming majority of listings are 2.5%. The last I ran this was about a week ago, and it was 92% of listings in Hunterdon County were 2.5%. So, I would say that's pretty much, that's fair compensation in my opinion. It's just my opinion. I feel comfortable with that. I don't feel the need for my buyers to chip in anything additional. Now, what we'll see in some other markets is that compensation has been dipping down, sometimes 2% or 1.5%. And there's reasons why it might dip down. And, sometimes that's okay, but other times it can be a problem because, for example, if it's a bank-owned property and they're only offering 2%, it's actually a lot of work for us to do a foreclosed or short sale property. And if we're getting compensated less, it's not a very good value proposition. I mean, I could be using that time, I only have so many hours in the day to work, and I could be using that time elsewhere. And if we have a buyer agency agreement, sometimes the buyers will kick in a little money there to cover the difference. And that's again, a whole nother subject, but this is the way it's been done since I've been in real estate. This is the way it's been done as far back as anyone can remember. And what ended up happening is kind of a false talking point in that seller said, why are we paying the buyer's agents? Why should we be forced to pay the buyer's agents? And then as a result of that talking point, there was a big class action lawsuit. And, we called into question that sellers should not be required to pay buying agents. So let's talk about that first point, because when I get asked the question by people who are listing a home to say, well, why are we paying the buyer's agent? So my typical answer to that is, well, you're not paying the buyer's agent. It's an offer of compensation in that the buyer is funding the transaction. So the money is coming from the buyer and they're purchasing your house. Let's say it's a $500,000 transaction. So they're purchasing your house for $500,000, which includes money. So they're going to give you $500,000 from their mortgage or their cash or whatever, and some portion of it is going to come back to pay their agent. In other words, in my opinion, buyer is paying the agent. So it's almost like a seller's concession. A seller's concession in a home transaction is where we say, let's say someone's having trouble affording closing costs, right? So there's $10,000 in closing costs, and the buyer doesn't have all that money. So they might do what's called a seller's concession and says, hey, we're going to do a seller's concession for $10,000. So instead of giving you $500,000 for your house, we're going to give you $510,000 so we can mortgage $510,000, but 10 of it is going to come back to us so we can pay Craig. Very common. And it's not just to pay me. It's often, like I said, to cover closing costs or whatever. And actually, my commission could be considered part of closing costs, however you want to word it. So that's been very common. So essentially, in my opinion, that's how buyer's compensation works, is like they're going to pay $500,000 for the house, but let's say my commission on that $500,000 house is, $14,000, which, by the way, that's not all my money. And that's another thing that needs to be explained often. Is like some of that goes to my broker, and, I have business costs and expenses associated with the listing, all sorts of things. But, my buyer is funding the transaction, and a portion of that money is being sent back to me as my commission. So to me, this notion that sellers are paying buyer's agent is a little flawed from the start. That being said, if we're going to change that, what's being proposed currently, and again, none of this is final, and I am only giving you my personal opinion. There is nothing behind this. I'm not representing anyone else. I'm just giving you my personal opinion as a professional in this industry. Gets a little complicated if we take away the way that we're doing it. What I think needed to happen was maybe a change in language or a change in the execution of that payment. Because again, buyer is funding transaction, and a portion of that funding is going to come back to me. I don't see that as the listing or the seller funding me, because they're saying, well, it's coming out of our proceeds. Well, the price is $500,000 because my commission is built into that. We know that already. So I would argue that point. But all that being said, if we change it and we say what's being proposed is that no buyer's compensation is going to be listed on the MLS at all. So there's a bit of ambiguity here right now. So in my opinion, what you're doing really is making it more difficult on the buyer, because now we have an additional negotiation point, right? So let's take an example with a multiple listing, or multiple offer listing. So you have three offers. One offer is saying, don't worry about the buy side commission. My buyers are going to pay that out of their pocket or out of closing, out of settlement fees or whatever, however they want to go about it. The buyers are taking care of that. Take that off the table. Second one called ahead and said, hey, are you guys comfortable compensating the buying agent out of the proceeds of the house? And the third one said, first of all, they wrote a tough offer, and they said, we're only asking for 1% commission. And the offer kind of reflected that, right? Like the offer was poorly put together. There's a lot of red flags. The lender's questionable, everything else. They said, hey, guess what? We're going to give you a value. We're going to say we're only taking 1% commission. We do want you to pay it, but it's only going to be 1%. So you can see how this creates ambiguity, right? Like today, if you're doing this, that's not in multiple offer situations. We have so many different variables to negotiate on, and that's kind of what makes it challenging to navigate multiple offer situations. And now you've added another big one. You've added another one that typically is about 2.5% of the sale price of the house. And it's now a variable. So that's not going to make things easier on the buyer for sure. And not only that, but there's potentially situations where buyers are not going to be able to roll this into their mortgage. And that part hasn't even been ironed out yet. We don't know that for sure, but I'll give you a great example. Currently with VA loans, which VA loans are very tough to get accepted in this market because they're not seen as being competitive versus a conventional mortgage or certainly not cash. But and that's a bit of a flawed concept in and of itself. We always tell people VA loans are actually excellent loans for a variety of reasons I won't get into today. But one of the conditions of a VA loan, as I'm aware of it, again, I'm not a finance professional, but I am a realtor, and we've been exposed to this many times, is that part of the stipulation of a VA loan is that the buyer cannot compensate their agent. It has to come via the traditional route of they buy the house, and out of the proceeds of that house, the buyer's agent is getting paid. Well, now that's no longer the case. So let's say that I take on a client who's a VA loan. They've served our country. They've earned the right to put down 0%. And the only stipulation is they can't directly compensate me. It has to come out of the proceeds of the home, as it always has. That's never been an issue in the past. Now it's an issue. So I don't know how that's helping those consumers right off the bat. We've isolated a set of consumers as I see it, unless I'm missing something or there's a plan for that, which I don't think there is, because again, none of this is finalized. This is a proposed settlement. To me, you've already set aside a subset of clients that are not going to be serviced by this. Now, the headline in the New York Times when this proposed settlement came out was that the lawsuit is going to slash real estate commissions and benefit the consumer. It's not going to slash here. This is one of the biggest aspects of this. It's not going to slash commissions at all. And part of the settlement is requiring written buyer agency agreements. Now, I actually like that. I actually encourage people. I've been chiming about this on TikTok all the time, is that you really should pick out your buyer's agent and sign an agreement with them. You are now a client of that buying agent. That buying agent is an advocate for you. There's loyalty in both directions. If you want out of a buyer's agency agreement, for me personally, text me and say, hey, we're going to go a different route, but we appreciate your time. It's really just a protection for me in the meantime that you don't go to an open house and unwittingly get engaged with another realtor. And then that realtor says, hey, wait a minute. I showed them the house. They were at the open house and I talked to them. They didn't tell me they were working with anyone. I want part of the commission. That's a dicey area in real estate. And that buyer's agency agreement protects me from that. But if you call me up and say, hey, Craig, you know what? We're moving to a different area. We don't like you, whatever the case is. Would you mind, just writing us an email and saying that, we're free of the buyer agency agreement? Yeah, no problem. It's just protection for me. It's not something I'm going to hold you to if we decide not to work together for whatever reason. So, I've always said sign buyer agency agreements. Well, now they're talking about as part of the proposed settlement is that they're required. So every offer that you put in with me now, we're going to need to determine how compensation is going to be given to me. Is it coming out of the buyer's pocket? These people are putting down, say 10% on a house, closing costs, and now also on top of that, they have to figure out how to compensate me. Previously, that was a non-issue. I still am going to ask in my buyer's agency agreement that I get my, 2.5% or whatever I choose. That's not changing. It's just changing kind of the logistics of it. It's not even where the money's coming from, because it's still coming from the buyers. It was always coming from the buyers. So that doesn't slash commissions. And part of the New York Times headline was that it's going to make house prices come down. I mean, potentially the only way that's really possible is if the market responds perfectly to this and says, oh, now that, buyers are compensating their own agents, we can expect that homes will go for a little bit less. So in other words, on a $500,000 house, if I'm taking, a commission of $14,000, in theory, I guess the offer would be $14,000 less, but we know that's not how that works. Like, there's not going to be an instant market response to say, everything's coming down about the amount of the commission of buying agents. We know it's not going to work that way. So, in a perfect world, in a vacuum, maybe it works that way, but there's no indication that that's how it's going to go. So potentially it could have no effect on pricing other than putting more strain on the buyer. It's a very short-sighted decision, in my opinion. So that being said, how does this change things for the consumer, in my opinion, other than the negatives I just told you? I don't think it does all that much. I know a lot of real estate professionals are really kind of freaking out over this. I really, there's, I would say the majority of us that are really of the school of thought that this really doesn't change anything. In fact, if anything, it's a bit of a positive for us, because I'm always advising people to get involved in buyer's agency agreements for all the reasons I just said. It's just a bit of a show of loyalty on both sides and say, oh, great. Now you're a signed client. Now you're one of my, 5 to 7 active clients that I maintain at any one given time. You're not just some random person that I'm going to show a house to on Saturday and then never hear from you again. That is a real problem in our industry. Is I end up having to spend time with people that pretends that they're very loyal to me, but then when I ask them to sign a buyer agency agreement, they won't do it. And then I don't hear from them for 2 weeks, a month, 6 months. And then randomly they'll hit me back again and say, hey, Craig, we're going to go see this house. Now that's a risk for me, because the more time I put into this person without them having any sort of allegiance to me, they could go to an open house anytime, talk to the listing agent and buy that house. And I'm just, I'm left out. And that's fine. I mean, people have a right to choose whoever they want to work with. But the problem is that I have to make a decision as a small business owner, solo agent, of where I'm going to spend my time. I got a family to feed. So I can't be spreading my time around too thin. Buyer's agency agreements takes care of that. So if you're going to require me to have all my buyers sign buyer agency agreements, I'm okay with that personally. As a high functioning real estate agent who has a decent client base, I'm good with that. I'm actually happy about that. I think the only people that hurts are kind of the low end of the market. And nothing against these people. We have part-timers. We have, people that are nearing retirement and they sell 4 or 5 homes a year. That's who's probably going to get hurt the most by this, in my opinion. But maybe not. I mean, maybe people that have been in it for a long time, like maybe they can have, they have a client database for all the years they've been doing real estate, and those people are happy to sign buyer's agency agreements with them. So from that standpoint, I really don't see much of a change, other than I think more people will be signing buyer's agency agreements, which I have always said is a win-win. It's a win for both the client and for the agent. So that doesn't change. If anything, it's solidified. That to me is a positive change. I think what gets more ambiguous here is, how is this helping the consumer? In my opinion, I'm not seeing it. And maybe that'll be explained at some point down the road, but I just do not see it. And I am convinced that there is nothing coming down the road. There is no variable here unless the settlement gets changed. And I shouldn't say settlement. I should say proposed solution to this litigation. Unless that gets changed, I don't see how this helps the consumer at all. I think it's going to complicate things. And really what it does, and the only reason I kind of wanted to come on here and talk about this, is it really solidifies my point about buyer agency agreements. So let's talk about this a little bit. So I'll get into this just a little bit, and I want to, and some of this is going to be rehashed. I'm just checking my audio here. Some of this is going to be rehashed from things I talk about on TikTok all the time. But I want to make this very clear, because now I think negotiations just got more complicated, right? So there are things that we can do as real estate agents to be sure. I don't want to say be sure. Assure ourselves that we have the best chance possible, given what my clients are willing to offer on the home. All that being considered, we have the best chance possible of winning our bid. And what I mean by that is, let's say that you have 2 clients that are exactly the same. Their offers are exactly the same. Again, let's use the example of a $500,000 house. They're putting 10% down. They're using the same lender. They have the same closing schedule. They're not willing to budge at all. They're waiving all inspections and appraisal. 2 offers, exactly the same. No one's budging. In that situation, this is another example of in a vacuum, in a perfect situation like that. How do you think those offers are going to be sorted out? So, and this is something that people hugely overlook, is that it's going to come down to comfort level of the listing agent and the seller in the buyer's agent. And it's a massive factor that people completely overlook. So I told a story recently in a class I was teaching, how I had a person call me. They were an online lead. They clicked on my ad. They were looking at the listings that I was putting up advertising, And I called them up and I said, "Hey, I'm just following up with you. You registered on my website. I'm just wanted to chat with you." And they said, "Yes, I am still looking for a home, but I'm not willing to be with any single agent. I'm not signing anything, and I will not do that until I find a home." And I said, "That's totally fine. I'm not going to try and talk you into doing business with me. I'm not here to try and solicit your business. I'm just following up with you." And to be very clear, listen, I am trying to get them as a client. Of course, that's why I'm calling them, but I'm not the type of agent I'm not going to go out of my way. Like if you're coming from that standpoint of like, I'm the enemy and you're just trying to fend me off, then we're not going to work together. I mean, I knew that from the moment I said, "Hey, can I just kind of talk to you about that?" And I said to her, I said, "Listen, I knew her budget because she registered on my website. I knew her budget, what she was looking for and what area she was looking for." And I said, "With what you're looking for, it's going to be very difficult to find. I think your best bet would be to sign with a buyer's agent who is going to work tirelessly for you to find that very specific thing that is going to be very hard to find." And she hung up on me. That was it. End of conversation. Now, here's the problem is what that person's not understanding is I know what she's looking for, and I can tell you right now, it's not available. Now, can I find it through a private deal? Can I find it through the avenues that we use internally? Like we have a big brokerage. We send out an internal email. "Hey, this is what my client looking for. I know it's, bottom of budget for a lot of the things that could be sold in that area. But if anyone happens to know of anything or anyone that's thinking about selling, like that can be a solution," because someone will say, "Oh, yeah, actually, you know what? I have a house needs a bit of work, but it definitely, hits that price point and is in the right area. So maybe that could work." And, we get a private deal going or something like that. Or something just hits the market. And the second it hits the market, I call up this person that hung up on me and I say, "Hey, found something perfect. Let's come up with a strategy, see how we can get you in there and be competitive to get a hold of this." I'm not going to do any of that because you literally just hung up on me when I said, "Hey, can you show a little loyalty to me so I can represent you and get you what you want," which is going to be very difficult to find. It's one of the most, as a professional, and I generally say about 50% of my transactions are with buyers. It's one of the most perplexing and frustrating aspects of this industry. And it's not the industry. Well, now it is with this proposed settlement, but it's not necessarily industry. It's the lack of understanding from consumers. When you go to a personal trainer, right? If you are you make the decision to get a personal trainer, you don't just go to a gym, close your eyes and say, "March a personal trainer out here." I don't care what method they use. I don't care if I'm doing CrossFit. I don't care if I'm just running all the time. I don't care. Just give me whatever you got. It's fine. And unfortunately, that's the attitude that people are using towards realtors for some reason. And it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, I see my feed is struggling here. So let me just take a quick look and make sure that I'm broadcasting okay. It looks a little jittery, but hopefully this is coming through okay. All right. So anyway, so the problem with this is there's different skill levels with real estate agents and with all the multi-offer things that we're dealing with. I was just talking to another client just now and I said, "Hey, the two houses that you want to see, I happen to know both those listing agents very well." That's a factor in your buyer's agent. Is your buyer agent known in the area? Do they have good working relationships with fellow professionals? Huge factor. Because I'll tell you as a listing agent, I just had a listing where we got 7 offers, right? And, right off the bat, there's flawed offers. There's offers that have major flaws in them and like they don't make sense in what's being proposed. The numbers don't add up correctly. They're proposing wild closing dates. They didn't put any effort into including all the necessary documents. Like right off the bat, you're like, "Oh, that's not a good, I hope it's not this person that has the best offer," and you're moving on, right? Alternatively, you get 6 offers. And I'm going to tell you, I've said this many times over the years, but when we get 6 offers, I can tell you right off the bat that there's a very good chance that 4 or 5 of them are highly flawed and are almost trash worthy. That is unfortunately the reality of this industry. So when we get 1 or 2 that is airtight, put together well, gives us a little confidence. Like, now this is an offer that's been presented correctly, that this person's had a lot of good conversations with their client. Client knows exactly what they're asking for. They're going to do some due diligence, but they're also letting us know they're not going to do anything crazy. They've asked us the right questions leading up to it. I've talked to this agent multiple times before the offer was submitted. All kinds of things. There's a confidence level, right? And I'm communicating that confidence level. All the offers are presented at all times. We're legally required to, and they're always presented. But as I'm presenting these offers to my seller, I am offering commentary on what the offer looks like. Like, hey, this one was really put together really nicely. I know this agent really well. They called me several times before the offer was presented. We discussed these things ahead of time. They said their lender is available to be called if we have any questions about the qualifications of the client. The client has given the lender permission to speak to us directly about their assets or whatever it may be. Like, there's 1,000 different ways to get offers accepted these days. Is like, what people don't understand in multiple offer situations, it's not just highest and best. I mean, that's what we call it because we got to put some sort of title on it. But I always tell people, first of all, it's called highest and best for a reason, because the highest is almost never the best. In fact, often the highest is absurd. The highest is way too high. It's never going to appraise. And the person that's putting in that crazy offer is putting 2.5% down. That's not a good offer, because the first question is like, hey, this is certainly not going to appraise for $300,000 over asking. Did you talk to your clients about that? Like, how are you planning on addressing that? It'll work out. Like, we don't feel good about that offer. It's just never going to come to fruition. It's just going to fail. So, when we get in situations where what I tell my clients is, if I can get to like the top 2 or 3, I'm pretty confident that I can get us to be the accepted offer. And the reason for that is because of because of that highest and best, right? Is I'm going to try my hardest to be the best. Might not be the highest, depending on what the client's offering me as far as my weaponry and putting in a good offer, but I am going to try and be the best. And I have specific ways that I submit my offers and conversations leading up to it, specific questions that I'm going to ask the listing agent. And that's something that I've spent, 4 years of my career developing and putting together. And this is like the most highly misunderstood point in real estate, is that people simply don't understand that, me as a full-time realtor, who, I'm happy with my compensation, and the fact that I'm happy with my compensation makes me love my job, work hard for my clients, and continue to further educate myself and put out a better product. If you were to just slash commissions, as the New York Times said that this settlement would potentially do, how is that necessarily going to help the consumer? Sure, I mean, maybe the commissions go down and that saves them a couple bucks, but I know that the issues that we have to navigate as buying agents, including inspection, negotiation, and negotiation up front of the actual deal. The percentage of my accepted offers that actually get to the closing table, all of these things. Like, if you took those stats for me and then compared it to the most, bottom of the barrel discount brokerage buying agent, I guarantee you my stats are better. And it's not a coincidence, because again, as a listing agent, I'm seeing both sides of it. When I get, back when it was crazy and we would get 20 offers, literally 15, 16 of them could have gone right in the trash. Poorly prepared, highly flawed, calling the agents, they don't answer their phone. As opposed to the person that called me 1 or 2 times to get a few clarifying questions, introduce themselves. Maybe I ask a colleague, hey, have you ever worked with Joe Smith over at Main Street Real Estate? Oh yeah, Joe's great. He's super easy to work with, very responsive. That is all factored in. The fact that so many consumers don't understand that aspect of buying a house is largely what's costing them finding a house in this difficult market. And I think it's extremely unfortunate that that's just not accepted by the general public, because it's a huge factor. I'm on TikTok all the time. I do all kinds of TikTok videos and YouTube as well, my YouTube channel. one of the biggest things is like, just like the typical kind of negative YouTube or TikTok comment of like, bro, no one wants a realtor. And it's like, that talking point is definitely out there. I'm not saying that it's the majority. I'm just saying it's out there. And to me, that is such a misinformed and toxic and negative talking point. It doesn't make any sense. I could give you a list of 30 clients that would tell you the story of how I got their offer accepted and how specifically I got their offer accepted. Anyone who has worked with me knows exactly how I do it, and they know that I'm one of the few that does it. So, as far as getting back to this litigation, the fact that I'm going to ask all my buyers to sign an agreement is not a problem for me. In fact, I think that may be the only thing that helps the consumer in this settlement. So it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. Again, to be very clear, this has not been approved by the courts. It's a proposed settlement, but change could be coming to real estate. In my opinion, after first review, this came out this morning. So, I don't know. What are we looking at? 8 hours later, looking at it personally, it's a blip in my radar. I think that, signing buyer's agency agreements is going to help. Here's my fear though. And we discussed this. I discussed this with some of my colleagues. So, MLS, multiple listing service, where all the listings are housed and they go out to Zillow and Trulia and everything else. That's where all that data comes from. We pay to be a part of that. We list it on there, and then they blast it out to everywhere. So no more compensation being listed on there. My fear is what could be horrible for consumers, and something for consumers to be aware of regarding this settlement is, as is the case on the listing side, you are going to get agents that come to you and say, hey, you know what? This new litigation came out. Guess what? You sign a buyer agency agreement with me. I only charge 0.5 percentage point commission. That's it. Your other agent's charging 5 times what I'm charging. I'm charging 0.5 percentage point. I'm going to tell you ahead of time, spoiler alert, that is not going to be a good experience. And that mistake could end up costing consumers big time money, like life-changing money, if they are advised poorly in terms of negotiation, repairs, inspection process, picking the right vendors, picking the right insurance broker, picking title agency, attorneys, everything. Going cut rate to save a couple bucks on commission on a one-time thing and something that you're going to live in for the next X amount of years. If it's your forever home, 25, 30 years, is extremely short-sighted. I have clients that have asked me about like saving money on their attorney, and they said, hey, we found an attorney that does closings for $500. And I'm like, please don't do that. But if you do, good luck, because that is not where you want to save your money. Having a good attorney, which by the way, a good attorney these days, I don't know, anywhere from like 12 to 1,600 is pretty common. That's not where you want to save a couple bucks, because it will cost you much more if you have a attorney that is not good. So it's going to be interesting, but I mean, if you're a good consumer, this doesn't change anything for you other than maybe the mechanics of how your agent's getting paid. But if you're a person that was always willing to sign a buyer agency agreement with me or whatever agent you use, this doesn't change anything for you. So I just hate that how the headlines are coming out. I think you're going to continue to see things talked about. We don't know if this is going to get approved yet, but it's definitely a talking point. But I will continue to ring the bell and say, sign a buyer agency agreement. Go out and find yourself an agent, develop a relationship. Just say, hey, let's have a little buyer's consultation. A good agent should have a buyer's consultation with you. Get an understanding of each other, sign that agency agreement. And now you're equipped. Now you're ready to go buy a house. And as part of that process of selecting that agent, when you have that buyer's consultation, you should be able to say to them, how are you getting offers accepted in this market? Tell me specifically what your strategy is and how you have been able to get offers accepted. Because if they can't answer that question, the chances are they're not getting offers accepted. Some of the offers that I get, even on this last listing, I mean, it's laughable. For lack of a better term, it is literally laughable. that someone somewhere is being represented by this person that I'm dealing with and putting in the most absurd offers, timing wise, in terms of the actual contract I'm getting, in terms of our communication. I mean, you can have one conversation with a person. Like, I'm a listing agent. I have to make sure that the deal closes, and my seller is not going to come back to me later and say, why didn't you tell us that this offer had tons of red flags and this agent did not know what they were doing? So that is why I communicate those things. So when I'm having these phone conversations, it can take 5 minutes and I'm like, this person has no idea what they're talking about. This is going to be a nightmare if I have to go with them. And sometimes we do have to, because, not so much in this market, but in previous markets, you might only have one offer. You might have had the house on the market for 3 months. Finally get an offer. Offer sucks, but it's all you got. And you got to kind of, if you're a good listing agent, you got to kind of take on some of the weight of the other agent's responsibilities and do them yourself. But in this market, if you're working with an agent that is not so good, you're probably not going to get a house. And I always remind people of this, especially in the past few years, is you hear news reports, or let's not even say news reports. We'll stop blaming the media for everything, but you'll hear people say, oh, you know what? My coworker, they have an $800,000 budget. They've put in, 6 offers on houses, 100,000 over asking. They can't get a damn house. My first question, once that number crosses like 5, is you need to tell me about how they're putting their offers in, because listen, we're all going to miss out on a few in this market. You're going to miss out on 1 or 2, but once you start getting to 5, 6, 10, if you haven't figured it out by that point, like, something else is wrong. I can't say that I've ever had a client not end up with a house. I'm trying to recall if I have. I've had people give up. That's a different story. Like, we just didn't really find anything. We took a shot at 1 or 2, didn't get them. And then, they're like, I don't see anything else. I'm just going to wait. In fact, some people that I still talk to this day, like, I know they're still out there. We just they got tired of the market. I mean, buyer fatigue is a huge thing in this market. That is definitely a thing. But if you've put in 10 offers and you still haven't gotten a house, you got to start questioning everything, including your agent, of course, and say, well, how are we supposed to get through this? Like, how can you get we're 0 for 10 here. Like, how do we know that it's ever going to get better? Like, what if you then find the perfect house, but you still got that agent? And don't you want some level of confidence there that agent is willing to navigate? Like, my question to the people that won't sign with an agent, they reach out to me and then they're like, oh, I don't want to sign anything. I don't want to work with a single agent. Is like, you think that any agent can get offers accepted in this market? Do you honestly think that? Because that is not how it works. And the fact that people are out there thinking that is concerning, because within the industry, it's hugely talked about. We have entire courses. I teach courses here in the building I'm sitting in, of teaching agents how to get offers accepted. It's a skill. It's not a guarantee. It's not just throwing money at it, because even if you throw money at it, you still could be on the wrong side of it with other concerns. So, I don't see anything changing with the settlement. You're going to hear a lot about it. I'm sure it's going to be coming out in the news if it's not out already. I mean, I've been spending my day on agent forums and stuff where everyone's, hair is on fire talking about it. Very polarizing set of news, by the way, too. Some agents have arguments why they think this is horrible. I'm not really in that school of thought, because I think at the end of the day, the good agents, this isn't a huge change for them. In fact, there may be some positives out of it, and there may be one positive for consumers, but I think that's it. I just think it's not as advertised. I think what's being advertised is this is going to cut housing prices, save the housing market, better for the consumer. That's not the case. It just simply isn't. I would love someone to make the argument of how you tie those two things together. So keep an eye out for it. If you have any questions about it, let me know. If you've made it this far watching, there's quite a few people that stop by. I appreciate everyone that takes time to watch any portion of this. I expect no one to sit through 39 minutes of this. But if you have any general questions or questions about this specific, please feel free to call me, message me, email me, whatever you want to do. And I'm always happy to answer those questions. I love talking real estate. I love helping people out. If I can service you in the New Jersey market, fantastic. If I can't, I can definitely put you with one of those good agents I just talked about. I can put you with those agents. Yeah, if there's anything else I can ever do for you, because this is going to be a big talking point for the next few months. If you have concerns or you have questions about how this will work in the future for buyers, then definitely let me know. I'll be happy to discuss that with you. So I think that's it. I think we're gonna call it a day. So come in next week, because I'm gonna have another agent. I believe the agent I'm gonna have, he's an agent. I don't remember offhand. I think in the Carolinas, and I ran into him in some online forum, and this is how I've gotten guests on the show in the past. Just found him to be an insightful, nice guy who is a high functioning real estate agent. And for this topic in particular, I think it'll be interesting to hear another agent, not just me talking at you, but like another agent's opinion of, I'm on it. To be perfectly honest, I'm not 100% sure if he agrees with me or disagrees with me, or we're somewhere in between. But I think it'll be interesting and good for both his people, because we're obviously not in the same market, but good for his people to see the talking points we come up with, as well as, people here in New Jersey. So stay tuned for that next week. And other than that, hope everyone's doing well. Have a great weekend. And if there's anything I can do for you, just hit me up. All right. Take care, be healthy, and enjoy your weekends. Bye-bye.